I've been working on mobile and intelligent systems for about 15 years now, and I believe that in the near future, our smartphones are going to know almost everything about us. Now, I'm making this claim for three reasons. The first is that smartphones are incredibly pervasive. Last year, over 1 billion smartphones were sold. In the United States, where I'm from, there's already over an 80% penetration rate. It's about 30% penetration rate worldwide as well, too. The second reason is that smartphones are incredibly intimate devices. They're perhaps the most intimate computer devices we've ever created. So to underscore this, let me give you a few fun facts about millennials. First is that 83% of them say they sleep with their phones, 90% of them say they check them first thing in the morning, and 1 in 3 admit to using them in the bathroom. But it's not just that the smartphones are intimate. The smartphone data is also incredibly intimate. If I took any of your smartphones right now, we could all easily see who you know based off your contact list and call log. Could also tell where you've been going based off of your GPS data as well as the photos, and could also understand what activities are going on based off of the sensor data that's there too. So the accelerometer, the light data, as well as microphone data, and so on. So we have this interesting fundamental tension here. On the one hand, the smartphone data can be used, smartphones can be used for incredible kind of good in terms of societal benefits and individual benefits, in terms of things like healthcare, urban planning, sustainability, and so on. On the other hand, this exact same data can be used in ways that are surprising that we might consider privacy intrusive. So let me give you a few examples. So for example, Pandora smartphone app, if you're using this, it turns out it was collecting your location data, your gender, your phone number, your unique phone ID, and shared it with dozens of advertisers, all without your knowledge. The Facebook Messenger app, in fact, if any of you are using this right now, you'd probably be surprised to know that your entire call history has been uploaded to Facebook servers. And we even found a Holy Bible app in our research that looks for location data and unique phone ID. So apparently even supreme deities need the help of Apple and Google to figure out where you are. So what can we do about this? So this is a research project that my colleagues and I have done called privacygrade.org. The idea here is that we want to increase the transparency of all these smartphone apps. And so what we did is we downloaded 1 million of them, and we also did analysis of them with respect to privacy and assigned grades of A, B, C, or D to them. So let me show you a little bit more about what you might see if you go to our website. Here's an example of an app. This is a drag racing app. You can see it got a grade of D. You can see an app description at the top, and this is the same you would see if you were looking at the app on the Play Store. And then at the bottom, it says, here's what permissions it's using. So in this case, it's looking at what kind of unique phone ID you have. It explains what that means. And then our analysis also is trying to explain why it's using this. So in this case, analytics. But if you scroll down, you'll see that there's even more data that's actually collecting. So it's also trying to use your network ID or your network access. It's also trying to access your location ID. Perhaps most surprisingly is at the very bottom, it's actually sharing your data with lots of different kinds of third parties. So for example, it says Flurry, which is an analytics company. It's also sharing it with other kinds of advertisers as well, too. So again, one of the main takeaways here is that your data is being captured and shared with lots of people without your knowledge. So one question you might have is, well, why are apps collecting all this data? So if you imagine an app is actually made out of lots of Lego pieces, some of these Lego pieces are actually made by other companies. So for example, Google, Facebook, Twitter, and so on. And so what you can do is you can grab those pieces, add it to your app, and make it easy to access those services. Now, it turns out that a lot of these third-party libraries are actually focused on advertising. So if you're an app developer, you want to make money off of your app, you just grab those third-party advertisers, stick it into your app, and you can start getting money. But the problem is that a lot of these third-party advertisers are actually collecting lots of data about you. In fact, in our analysis, it turns out about 40% of the apps are collecting data only because of these third-party libraries. And so the reason they're doing this is because they want more information about you so they can target better ads. So for example, if the advertisers knew that you were here in Montreal, they could do better localized advertising. If they knew where you work and where you live, they could also infer a lot about your demographics and also do better advertising as well, too. So this actually does make sense from a revenue perspective, but at the same time, a lot of data is being sent to these places, and you don't know about it. We've also seen other kinds of uses too. So for example, some apps are using it for social networking. They want to get your contact list so they can start speeding up the development of their social network. Or they might be doing things like analytics to understand what you're doing with the apps, what pages and what screens you're looking at, as well as where you are when you do that. But the vast majority of these uses is still advertising. Another question you might have is, well, how does privacy grade actually work? How do we assign these grades? So the key idea is that we're doing privacy as expectations. So what do people think an app does compared to what it actually does in practice? So for example, if I told you that there's a motorcycle app that uses microphone data, a lot of you would probably be surprised that it actually does that. So there's a big gap here between expectations and reality. In contrast, if I told you that Google Maps uses location data, none of you would be surprised. It's very obvious. So we consider that to be a small privacy concern because people already know about that. So what we did specifically is we used a technique called crowdsourcing. This is where we actually use these online labor markets where people can do really simple tasks. And we ask them questions similar to the children's game Mad Libs. So we ask questions like, how comfortable are you with drag racing using your location for ads? And then what we did is we aggregated all the results together and we created a model that we applied to all 1 million apps. So here's an example of what this model looks like. Along the bottom, you see here's some of the purposes that we have. So using the data internally, using it for advertisements, analytics, or social networking services. Along the left side, you can also see examples of the data that might be used. So find location is your exact GPS location. Course location is location about 100 meters or so. Your phone state, which is also your phone ID. Your contact list, the short message systems, as well as your account data. So here's an example of how we use this. So if you look at the highlighted circle here, highlighted square, it says contact list for ads is a score of negative 0.97. So this is a really low score. So this is near the bottom of what people feel is very uncomfortable. So people are generally uncomfortable with your contact list being used for ads. In contrast, if you look at the top right here, so location data being used for social networking, people are close to neutral. So that's near the middle of the score. So our research has actually had a lot of positive impact so far. So it's been featured in the popular press several times. Some of our earlier work actually was used to help with the Federal Trade Commission in the United States in terms of finding some of these apps. We've also shared our data with Google and many other researchers. And one team, one app developer, even put out a press release saying that they were improving their privacy behaviors because of our work. Now, you also might be wondering, well, what can I do to protect my own privacy? The first thing you can do is pay much closer attention to all these notices. So what I mean by this is that every smartphone app and all the major smartphone systems right now, they will give you information about what these apps are trying to do. So for example, you can see over in the top right over there that this is for iOS, that this app is about to use your camera and is trying to explain to you why it's using that. So instead of just sort of blindly hitting OK, start trying to pay more attention to this. The one at the bottom is from Android and is shown when you're about to install an app. And so you should also ask, does this make sense? So for example, this shows Instagram, and it shows that it's going to be using camera, which makes a lot of sense for Instagram. But it also uses microphone. Does that actually make sense? The other thing you can also do, too, is you can also turn off your location services unless you actually need to use those. So on Android and iOS, it's actually pretty easy to do. You can go to your settings, and you can find it pretty quickly. But these are really short-term kind of Band-Aids on the problem. We really need much longer-term solutions. And so at the very beginning, I mentioned that there's all these amazing technologies that can really benefit society if we can legitimately address privacy concerns. And this is the main reason why I really entered this space to begin with, because I knew that there's all these incredible things that we can be doing, again, with healthcare, urban planning, and sustainability. So let me give you one example of an app that some of my colleagues and I are working on, which is an emergency response app. If you remember the Boston Marathon bombing just a few years ago, there was actually a lot of people there with smartphones. And imagine if the smartphones were capturing your location data, the microphone data, accelerometer, but that data is never used unless someone says there's actually an emergency and now we need the data. And then once someone flips that switch, then it'll ask you, hey, are you willing to share your data with the emergency responders or with the federal investigators? And then they might be able to send queries to your phone too. Hey, we're looking for people who look like this. Can we look through your photos? And they might have automated scans that do that and say, hey, it looks like there might be 2 possible hits. Are you willing to share those photos with us? So here I think you can see the tension. On the one hand, this data can be incredibly useful, but at the same time, we don't want to share the data unless it's absolutely needed. So the good news is that there's many researchers, like here at Chi, and also worldwide, that are working on how to improve this problem. But we also need your help, too. So one thing you can do is be a lot more willing to pay for apps. So as I mentioned, the advertisers are really the main reason why so much data is being collected. And so it makes sense. These app developers are working hard, but they need to make money off of things that they're working on. So if you're more willing to pay for this, then they don't really have to work on advertisements, and then the advertisers don't have to collect that much data about you. The second thing you can do is you can also delete privacy invasive apps and let the app developers know why. when we've talked a lot to app developers, they've all uniformly said, we have never gotten any feedback about privacy. And so this is a market failure. Because we don't say anything about privacy, they don't do anything about it. And so the only way that we can really do this is if we collectively push back against them. And the last thing you can also do, too, is continue to raise concerns with the legislators. So you all heard about Cambridge Analytica, and you've also seen a lot of the problems that Facebook and Google's having. Well, this is just really the beginning, because there's just all this data out there. And so many of these people want this data so they can do better advertisements and better kinds of services. But again, we really need to focus a lot on the privacy issues so we can achieve the really beautiful kinds of apps that are possible out there. So in Europe, there's a new kind of regulation called the General Data Protection Regulations, the GDPR, that will definitely help with things. But I would consider that to be a first step, and we still need to go much further. So we're actually at this interesting crossroads in history. There's only one time in history that this global internet will be created, and that time is now. And there's also only one time in history in which our entire planet will be blanketed with sensors, and that time is now. And so we're the ones who are creating and going to be living in this world. So I would urge you all to think about this question that's up there. How can we create a connected world we would all want to live in? So thank you very much. You can see more information about Privacy Grade at this website and our research group at cmuchimps.org. Thank you very much.